The Unofficial History of Sacha Timony. Part 4. Breaking Out. The darkness seemed to deepen as Sacha listened to the sounds of scratching as the rats climbed closer. She stepped lightly backwards, her hand gripping hard to the needle in the baldric. Untying the thread, she began to draw it slowly from its sheath. Her eyes stayed fixed on the blackness in front of her, though, as she listened for any hint of direction. Just then, though, for the briefest of moments, her eyes hurt. A burst of light that would have been lost in the cacophony of a sunlit day, but somehow more dazzling in this dark place, flashed about. She heard a squeak from out the darkness. The rat had seen it too. She looked quickly around. The light had subsided just as immediately as it had appeared. She crouched down. The scratching started again. This time, she could sense something not far in front of her. Something odorous and heavy, pressing on the tabletop. She jumped forward. Lifting the needle high, she brought the blunt end down hard on the rat's head. It squeaked and hissed in frustration, then recoiled as the brightness flashed again. Sacha landed hard on her feet, the rat behind her. She made to turn, but the long tail of the creature whipped about in its confusion, and wrapped hard round one of her ankles. She fell hard onto her back. Staring up into the lofty vaults of the storeroom, she realized that she could make out some movement in the shadows. A slight but ever so real waft of fresh air seemed to be coming down. Her mind raced. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of rodent feet scrambling as the rat turned on her again. She brought her needle up just in time as the mouth of the rat opened wide, dripping saliva down on her. Stabbing it hard through the roof of its mouth, she leapt back to her feet as the rat tumbled backwards. And then again, the flash. She looked at her needle. Even in the dull light, she could see the specks of blood dripping down it. This was real. This was happening. Even in spite of her predicament, she smiled, adrenaline pumping hard. She did that! Moving the needle this way and that, she called out to the darkness. You see? You see who I am? I am Sacha Timony. This is my needle, and this is my life, and you can't stop me. Her celebration was short-lived, though, as she spun on the spot to the sound of more clawing. There must be dozens. As she turned, though, her needle held high in front of her. She saw it. The flash came again. From her needle. She tried desperately to focus, to block out the sounds of the creatures and the fear in her heart, and to think about this. Moving the needle back and forth, she realized it was picking up the thinnest ray of light. Light? Coming from... She looked up. Coming from the roof. That was it. Salvation. She fixed her eyes hard on the side far above her. A gap in the roof that seemed to open and close, throwing a small spotlight down onto the scene below. Tiles wouldn't move like that, though. This must be a thatched roof. She resheathed her needle and held tight to her pack. This wasn't going to be easy. The rats were coming closer still. She turned again and ran to the wall. It was stone, rough cut and jagged. She tried it carefully, slipping back down onto the hard wood of the table. She gasped as she heard the noises again, louder now, running towards her. There was no time. She would have to just try. Leaping from the table, she stretched out her hands and grabbed onto the jutting piece of masonry. Rats' teeth closed on thin air where she had been standing. Ha! Not today, she shouted down. Her hands trembled, though, as the stone fragments seemed to loosen. She pulled up and grabbed again at the wall as her first handhold tumbled down and hit a rat square on the head. They were clawing at the wall now, but she didn't stop to watch. Inch by inch, driven by great need, she began to scale the wall until, at last, she felt her hand close on the edge of a wooden beam. With a grunt, she threw herself up onto it, standing and nearly falling back down as she felt a cold breeze push her. Crouching, she could see where it was coming from. The hole in the roof was far more noticeable here. Damaged thatch swayed in the breeze, and she could see the sky. Steadily and slowly, she came to standing again. Reaching up, she felt the gap. It would be tight, but she could get a firm grip. Heaving hard, several scraps of thatching falling down below her, she came slowly up and out. The daylight was blinding. For a moment, she just lay down on the roof and breathed a sigh of relief. In time, though, she looked around. What was she going to do now? Far below her, she could see the street. She was hardly at the top of it all, though. The storeroom she had been in was surrounded by far taller buildings climbing up and looming over her. Maybe this could work, though. She could try climbing further up. Perhaps she could cross the whole town this way and try to come down in the docks. It would be risky, though. That would be a long drop for a misstep. Or she could try to climb down to the street from here. There looked to be a water butt nearby. If she could try a dive when no one was looking, she could land quite safely. But then, if she missed or if someone spotted her, she wasn't sure which would be worse. Turning around, she looked at the nearby buildings too. They had windows on a similar level to the roof of the storehouse. Maybe she could climb in through one of them, make her way through the house. In the distance, she could still see the large ship. It hadn't sailed yet. There was still time. If only she could get there fast enough.
This story is written by Jimmy Clephane. For this and more, as well to vote on where Sacha should go next, consider backing Jimmy Clephane on Patreon for as little as £1 a month.